The Washington Post just exposed a bunch of dietitian colleagues for being paid by junk food industry. And yes, we definitely need to talk. Hey everyone, I'm Abbey Sharp. Welcome to Abby's Kitchen. Today we're going to be talking about this piping hot tea of a Washington Post article called "The Food Industry Pays Influencer Dietitians to Shape Your Eating Habits." Whew! Those journalists woke up and chose violence with a headline like that. But clearly your girl has some pretty big thoughts, so I got my tea, let's chat. I've been working full-time in media for 11 years. So I've been doing brand partnerships long before there was like any kind of playbook on how to do paid partnerships. I was doing spokesperson work long before there was any kind of like TikTok or Instagram reels. But anyway, I basically fumbled my way through this kind of content creator role at the start of my career because it was a really new phenomenon and there were no influencers for teaching influencing or blogs to read about blogging. Influencing did not even exist when I started. I was a blogger. Do we even say that anymore? Now, if you work in this space at all, you are a influencer. Though, FYI, I actually do not like that term. I don't identify with it at all. I see myself first and foremost as a dietitian who just so happens to disseminate knowledge to the masses. But anyways, I actually learned best practices by calling my dietetic college up on the phone basically every week. So I was asking them, what can I do? What can't I do? What can I say? What can't I say? Etc. And honestly, even they weren't 100% sure because social media was just starting to take off. But anyway, obviously I'm sure, I know that mistakes were made in my early days. And when I was starting out, I'm sure I worked with a bunch of brands that I definitely would not work with today. So for example, when I was fresh out of internship and I was really still exploring what kind of dietitian I was and what I believed in, I'm pretty sure I wrote a blog post in partnership with Weight Watchers. No, would I touch that today? Unless it was ripping them apart. Also, I did a video several years ago with MSG in partnership with whatever commodity board makes MSG. And while I still agree with everything I said in that video because it was heavily researched on my part personally, and I scrutinized the out of the messaging that I was given, today, I probably wouldn't partner with MSG. And I don't think that MSG is dangerous, but I also don't think that it's contributing greatly to public health either. So I took that video down a while ago because it just no longer aligns. But yeah, back when I was just starting out, I didn't have any kind of representation. I had no mentors. So I was probably a lot more sheepish when it comes to pushing back on brand messaging. The influencer marketing world in itself was so green. Like I said, it didn't even exist. So I don't think that any of us had really figured out our roles or expectations for influencers and influencer agencies. But anyways, I am definitely in a very different place a decade later. So today I have a team about 12 people helping me with content and watching my back. I've worked with the top media coaches. I've got direct contacts with YouTube and TikTok, and I have a lot more support to help navigate this constantly changing landscape. So I have come a long way since that little green newbie posting blog posts and videos in exchange for granola bars or free movie passes. Because granola bars are delicious and I love me a good movie night. But these things don't pay my mortgage, nor do they pay my staff. So that's just my backstory on my own journey as a dietitian working in the media. But I now really want to talk about this Washington Post article. And I have some big thoughts. So buckle up. So in short, this article focused on social media videos created by specific colleagues of mine who had partnered with maybe what we would consider more controversial commodity boards like American Beverage and the Canadian Sugar Institute. The former campaign focused on unpacking the WHO's concerns about artificial sweeteners like aspartame, and the latter campaign was really focused on neutralizing extreme fear-mongering around sweets and sugar. The funny thing is, I am on board with both of these messages. I certainly can't speak to all the content pieces they reviewed or referenced, but just because something is sponsored by an industry doesn't mean it's necessarily lies, even if the industry itself is kind of sus. So for example, let's look at this reel by Cara Harbstreet. She literally explained why the WHO headlines were misleading and alarmist, considering what they actually meant, which was something that at the time, a lot of us science communicators did, including myself. I basically said the exact same thing. And nobody fed me that script because I was not sponsored to say it. The headlines, in my opinion, did not represent the data. And then this one from Jen, the dietitian, who gave some really great suggestions for parents on how to manage Halloween candy with their kids, including letting their kids eat whatever they want on day 1 and 2. This, again, is literally the exact same advice that I've given on my channel because it's what pediatric and family dietitians know works best. I scanned through the other posts that were mentioned here, and while there are a few videos that maybe messaging-wise wouldn't be 100% on brand for me, but that's me. Dietitians are not some homogenous group of robots just regurgitating the food guide. We all have our own approaches to interpreting and communicating the evidence. Just because I personally can't see myself partnering with these commodity boards, because again, they don't fit the screening criteria that my team and I have very carefully crafted for me, I don't think it's wrong to be paid to communicate an evidence-based message that's on brand. Like all these messages that I believe in. But you know who does not believe in them? This guy right here, the lead author, Anahad O'Connor. Anahad is well known for his investigative journalism related to the role of industry-funded research on sugar and the obesity epidemic, which again explains why this story was totally his beat. And while he may be a Yale graduate and taking down big sugar may be a special interest of his, he actually has no training or education in nutrition at all. And yet, not only is he pretty much exclusively writing about health and wellness for media publications, but he somehow is qualified to write a whole book about the foods you must eat and co-author another book on weight loss. Again, no qualifications in the field. I've also seen him interviewed on podcasts and YouTube about nutrition as if he is a nutrition expert. And interestingly, he seems to focus on nutrition messaging that is at odds with most major authorities' recommendations, and therefore is at odds with most dietitians' recommendations. That is, from what I can see, he seems to lean into a very restrictive, like no sugar, full paleo, hunter-gatherer, kind of carnivore leaning intermittent fasting diet. So again, once I discovered this, it totally made sense as to why this whole article focused on the dangers of sugar and aspartame. It totally made sense why he called out a handful of female dietitians who happened to be largely anti-diet dietitians who were sharing pretty neutral, evidence-based information. What's kind of shady is he was ripping into them for breaking down the WHO's sensationalized headlines on aspartame, and yet on July 12th, he basically did the same thing. Like one of his WAPO articles shared the exact same messages that my colleagues shared. Interestingly, I didn't see any kind of disclosure on behalf of the journalist related to his personal nutrition belief system or the nutrition books that he's authored that supports his approach, which again were written without education in the field. I mean, I feel like that would have been good to know, seeing as that may have played a role in his interpretation of the crime. Of course, seeing a nutrition expert suggest any amount of candy on Halloween may seem dangerous to a nutrition expert who vehemently is against any or all sweets, but it's just really ironic that there's such a double standard here because lack of disclosure was his other main point of criticism. And I actually agreed with him here. The suggestion that in some cases dietitians did not make it super clear that their posts were sponsored or who their posts were sponsored by was shocking to me. You know, I've trained and coached hundreds of dietitians on best practices for media and brand work because again, I have had skin in this game before day one. And disclosure for dietitian content creators is rule number one. So to be clear, the dietitians did disclose by stating sponsored or ad in the description, but they either did not use the paid partnership tool or they didn't tag the commodity board that sponsored it. And again, I agree, this is not ideal. This is not being super transparent. This is definitely not my practice when I work with brands. Like, I have been so adamant about this when I do any kind of colleague webinars or mentorships, because when other influencer or content creator dietitians don't disclose, it hurts us all. It leads people to not trust us. Exhibit A, the moment this article came out, people ran to my aspartame TikTok video and asked, is this sponsored? Spoiler alert, it was not. And there are videos posted from like more alternative wellness accounts where the comments are definitively accusing me of being in the post. When it's like, girl, did you read it? Because that is defamatory, slanderous, spreading misinformation, and quite frankly, not fair, even if you disagree with my content. As influencers themselves, they have a responsibility to be truthful and fact-based, or they are more at fault than the RDs in this post. But back to the piece and the author. You know, I really do have to wonder if this journalist had something just against RDs across the board. Because I know a lot of RDs who are not named in this article, who did lengthy interviews with the authors, and none of them were included. Possibly because it didn't help this journalist's case. I also know from expertise that some brands and commodity boards will push back when it comes to using the paid partnership tool or being super explicit about the actual sponsor, which in the case of aspartame was American Beverage. And yeah, it's still on us to push them back and say, no, I want to be super transparent. I cannot tell you how hard I've had to push brands sometimes. But the guy could have also laid it into industry for their role in being secretive or sus, because it's not a coincidence that all of these creators disclosed the exact same way. I wonder why. But anyways, bottom line on the article, I do not believe that the author fairly represented the intentions or actions of my colleagues, but I do believe we should all be cautious interpreting any of these kinds of pieces as unbiased truth. We all need to be more critical consumers of what we read. But back to me for a hot minute, because I can only speak with 100% certainty about how I work as an RD working in the media. So a huge part of my personal brand has been honesty and transparency. I can't speak for all RD content creators who are working with brands, but that is huge for me. So in the spirit of transparency, I'm gonna tell you exactly how things work behind the scenes over here. Step one. Typically, my agent will get an email from a brand or an agency, and that email will say something like, hi, we love Abbey, we're a food or supplement company, whatever, and we would love to sponsor one of Abbey's YouTube videos or a TikTok, etc. Here's what we're looking for. You know, I don't actually work with a ton of commodity boards or industries, even though there are some that I fully believe in, but they just don't come my way very often anymore. But again, I would be asking myself if the industry or commodity helps public health in some way. But if it's a brand or product, which is usually what I work with, I will look at the company's consumer-facing website, look at the ingredients, look at the claims, read third-party testing reports. By the way, this is a really easy way for me to suss out which supplements we work with and don't work with, because I only work with companies that do third-party testing. But anyway, then I'll ask some questions if I don't see what I need to see, and if anything seems off, it's an immediate no. Sometimes it's a really fast no that starts basically with my agent. So any heavy weight loss related apps or supplements or scales, she'll send it to me as a courtesy / a laugh. And we're both kind of like, did they even bother to Google me and what I do? But anyways, I would say as a percentage of offers that I get, 80 to 90% of them die right here. That's how strict we are. But assuming it passes my sniff test, I ask for two basic things. I want to try the product or service, and I want to know what their talking points are. Because sometimes a product may seem totally fine and benign on paper, but when I see their messaging, I'm like, hell no. The testing part is self-explanatory. I have to like it, or if it's not my style, because I have my own little preferences too, I have to think that it could be something that would be helpful for at least some subset of my audience. But the messaging can get a little tricky. So basically for brand campaigns, they send out a deck or a PowerPoint or a Word doc with their key messages and usually a set of do's and don'ts for things that you can or can't legally say. It is fully up to me now to take those messages and to create a piece of content that communicates them while still being true to my voice and MO. Oftentimes, some of the messages I see in the deck are a no for me. And as I mentioned, when I was young and green, I probably wasn't as bullish as I am now about it. But now I am never afraid to completely change things, redline the out of it and push back. So for example, a lot of food or supplement brands will want me to say something like, oh, their product is clean. And you guys know I don't like that word, so I say no. Or if they told me that they wanted me to say that product will help you detox, I'll be like, no, we know that's BS. And sometimes they maybe want me to make a nutrition claim that I don't feel is supported by enough high quality evidence. So I will skip that, or I'll suggest a claim that is supported by evidence. And sometimes we push back so hard, we just can't reach an agreement and we just have to walk away. And I know that I am lucky to be in a position where I can be super selective like this and have the confidence to know my worth as a science communicator. But I've worked really hard to earn your trust. And it's ultimately worth so much more to me than like a one-off ad read. Then it comes to actually creating the content. So sometimes they have an angle that they're hoping to go for, like back to school or like a specific holiday. But for the most part, I hold all creative control. I pitch a handful of concepts that I think will work for me and my audience and where it makes thematic sense to include the brand, and then I write the script. The brand's job is simply to approve the script I wrote for legal and accuracy reasons and to approve the video that I shot, again, for legal and accuracy reasons. But I'm never letting a brand tell me what to say, how to say it, or what the video is even about. And by the way, this is why I typically do like ad read style on my YouTube videos. I don't want brands to have a say in the content that I put out there for you guys. Like I'm really strict about protecting my IP. So it's like they sponsored a video, but I'm still 100% in control. And then it comes to posting. So we disclose the dang partnership. Actually, I cannot tell you how many times brands have pushed back because I always like to put the disclosure like AD in the first sentence of the copy of the post, because that way you don't need to click see more to understand and notice that it is sponsored. But a lot of the brands or agencies that I've worked with will want me to kind of put it at the very end with all the other hashtags. And so that's what most influencers do. But according to the FTC and also just like my basic morals, I don't think that is a clear, transparent disclosure. It needs to be visible. And while the paid partnership tool is not mandatory, I do think it adds a visual on the video that again helps people clearly understand and see that it is a paid partnership. Now, the other thing I want to clarify about us dietitian influencers working with brands that I feel that the Washington Post article misrepresented is this idea that we're all just kind of working with these brands behind the scenes to push some kind of sinister agenda. That like the more aspartame that gets consumed, the more money we make. I mean, there may be dietitians out there who are longtime ambassadors or spokespeople or affiliates for a commodity or brand, which again, they should be legally disclosing every single time that commodity or brand is mentioned, but that's not personally how I work. I mean, maybe one day I'll sit on the board for a brand, in which case, again, you will know about it every single time they're mentioned. But for me, each individual piece of content is spelled out super carefully in our contract. So it's not just like I'm always sneakily seeding messages in without you knowing. And I'm gonna use dairy as an example because of all the brands or industries that I've partnered with, dairy content is arguably the most controversial. So first of all, why do I work at dairy? Well, I 100% appreciate that dairy is not for everyone, whether it's because you're vegan or lactose intolerant or you just don't like it. But dairy is a huge part of my family's diet. It's a major source of quality nutrition for me and for many others. There's a plethora of quality, unsponsored peer-reviewed research to support it, and the messaging is always evidence-based. Not to mention, me eating dairy and sharing nutrition education about dairy doesn't mean I'm not eating and not sharing nutrition education about non-dairy alternatives. Like, look at my fridge. I'm an equal milk opportunist. All of these things can have their place, and thinking one is nutritious doesn't mean that alternatives that people depend on are bad. And that is really important here. Like, I never talk up a product by putting an alternative down, because chances are, I think both are really great. So this is very much on brand for me. And again, I'm not getting like monthly cash installments from the dairy industry to brainwash my followers into eating more cheese. If I'm being paid by dairy to talk about dairy on Instagram, you will know it. If I'm being paid by a cheese brand, you'll know it. I am being paid on a per content piece basis for that one random TikTok or that one sponsor ad read on my YouTube channel. So I don't become richer if you eat more yogurt. There's literally no incentive for you to buy dairy over non-dairy. I actually don't even get any information on ROI when I do a campaign. But anyway, what I am saying is that if I talk about dairy and the video doesn't say sponsored, I'm not being paid for it. No one has looked at it and said, yep, that looks good. It's just what I'm eating or doing or taking. And if it says sponsored, I'm being paid for it. I look at the messaging, I craft the content in my voice based on what I'm comfortable with, and they give it a thumbs up before I post. In both cases, the messaging is the same. I like dairy, so I talk about it, both when I'm paid and when I'm not being paid. And again, most of you guys know I talk equally about non-dairy milk alternatives as well. And know that if a brand makes its way onto any of my channels, it is being heavily vetted specifically by me. So the bottom line is, I was really hurt by this article. I felt that the author went into it with a clear agenda against female dietitians, particularly anti-diet dietitians, because perhaps our general messaging of balance doesn't align with more extreme, restrictive fringe diet. And again, this interest was never disclosed. I only know that because I had to do my own sneaky sleuthing investigative journalism after hours. And I also felt that the tone really undermined a lot of the important work that us female media dietitians do and shamed us for seeking out any means to turn the hard work that is science communication into a career or side hustle. It takes an enormous amount of work to research and write evidence-based nutrition content. Like a YouTube script requires grad school dissertation level work. And I post 2 20-minute YouTube videos a week, 2 shorts a week, 7 TikToks a week, 3 blog posts, plus up to 14 Instagram posts, and Lord knows how many stories. This is a job, and YouTube ad rev isn't what it used to be. If you want really well-researched, well-written content, you have to be okay with dietitians accepting sponsorships that they feel represents their MO. You do not have to be okay with them being sneaky about it and not disclosing, nor should any of us be spreading mis or disinformation that could harm the public. But I don't know, like diffusing the panic over the media reports about aspartame or telling parents that restricting sugar too aggressively is bad is not dangerous misinformation. It's exactly what I would tell people too. What I am saying here is that as dietitians, we need to work for your trust. And I know that I've worked really, really hard to earn yours. Transparency, honesty, and evidence-based practice. That's what you've come to expect from me, and that is what you should continue to expect from me. But I would love to hear your thoughts, any questions, any clarifications. I'm happy to go into more detail. Leave me a comment below, and don't forget to hit up my description for my free 100 question combo ebook, and I will see you next time on Abby's Kitchen. Bye!